My husband hid me at the party. The CEO found me and said, "I've been searching for you." I remember that evening like it was yesterday. The silk dress I'd carefully pressed, the hopeful smile I wore, the way my husband's eyes slid right past me as if I were a stranger. He didn't introduce me, didn't acknowledge me. He simply tucked me away in a corner of that glittering ballroom, like something embarrassing he needed to hide. I sat there, invisible among the champagne glasses and polished laughter, wondering when exactly I had become a woman unworthy of standing beside the man I'd built a life with. But what I didn't know that night, what none of us knew, was that someone else was watching. Someone who remembered my name when my own husband had forgotten it mattered. Hello, my dear ones. This is Grandma Alice, and I'm so grateful you've joined me here today. If these stories touch your heart the way they've touched mine, please subscribe to my channel and help me reach 1,000 subscribers before next week. Your support means the world to this old woman who still believes that every story, no matter how painful, deserves to be told. Now, settle in close because this one still makes my heart ache. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks before the party. Elegant cream cardstock with gold lettering, Sterling Technologies annual gala. My husband, David, had held it up to the light like it was made of pure gold itself. "This is it, Margaret," he'd said, his voice trembling with excitement. "This is where careers are made, where connections happen, where I finally get noticed by the executives." I'd smiled at him from across our modest kitchen table, the same table where I'd served him breakfast every morning for 23 years. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart." He'd barely heard me. His mind was already at that party, already climbing ladders I couldn't see. You see, my darlings, David worked in middle management at Sterling Technologies, a software company that had grown from a small startup into something magnificent over the past decade. And me? Well, I was just Margaret, his wife, the woman who'd put him through graduate school by working double shifts as a technical writer. The woman who'd given up her own engineering career to move cities whenever his job required it. The woman who'd made our house a home while he made his way up the corporate ladder, one careful step at a time. But that was fine. That was love, I told myself. Love was sacrifice. The night of the gala, I took extra care with my appearance. I wore the navy blue dress I'd been saving, simple but elegant, and I'd even splurged on having my hair done at the salon. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the woman I used to be. Margaret Chin, MIT graduate, the girl who'd once designed circuit boards that people said were revolutionary. She was still in there somewhere, beneath the years of putting everyone else first. David barely glanced at me when I came downstairs. "You ready?" he asked, checking his watch. "Do I look all right?" I asked softly. He gave me a quick once-over. "Yeah, fine. Let's go. We can't be late." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten, but I pushed the feeling away. Maybe he was just nervous. This was an important night for him, after all. The Sterling Technologies headquarters was transformed into something magical that evening. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light across marble floors. Waiters glided through the crowd with trays of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. Everyone looked so polished, so successful, so significant. We walked in together, David's hand barely touching the small of my back. But the moment we crossed the threshold into that golden room, I felt him pull away, not physically at first, but energetically. Like he was already separating himself from me. "Margaret," he said quietly, leaning close to my ear. "Listen, I need to network tonight. Serious networking. So maybe you could just find somewhere comfortable to sit? Let me work the room?" My heart stuttered. "Of course. But won't you introduce me to—" "I'll catch up with you later," he said quickly, his eyes already scanning the crowd for important faces. "Just stay out of the way, okay? And please don't talk about the old days or your engineering stuff. Nobody wants to hear about ancient history." Ancient history. That's what my accomplishments had become. The patents I'd filed. The designs that had been purchased by major tech companies. The awards I'd won before I became Mrs. David Preston, and slowly disappeared into the background of his story. He walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing alone near a tall arrangement of white orchids. I watched him approach a group of men in expensive suits, watched how his posture changed, how his laugh became louder, more confident. He belonged here. I was just an accessory he'd chosen to leave in the corner. I found a small table tucked beside the windows and sat down, trying to make myself invisible. Around me, the party swirled with life, conversations about mergers and stock options, laughter tinkling like the champagne glasses, couples dancing beneath those shimmering lights. And there was David, in the center of it all, gesturing animatedly, telling stories that made everyone lean in closer. Not once did he look back to find me. An hour passed. Then another. I watched wives standing proudly beside their husbands, being introduced, being included. I watched David shake hands with senior executives, watched him nod and laugh at all the right moments. And whenever someone asked him a question, I could see their lips moving even from a distance. He would answer without ever gesturing toward me, without ever saying, "My wife and I." I had become a ghost in my own marriage. "Excuse me, ma'am? Can I get you anything?" I looked up to find a young waiter with kind eyes smiling down at me. "No, thank you," I whispered, my throat tight. "I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. I was disappearing, dissolving like sugar in water, and nobody, not even my own husband, seemed to notice or care. That's when I saw him. The man in the impeccable charcoal suit who stood near the main stage, surveying the room with an expression that was both warm and commanding. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and there was something about the way people naturally made space for him, the way they leaned in when he spoke, that told me he was someone important. Later, I would learn his name was Richard Sterling, founder and CEO of Sterling Technologies. But in that moment, all I knew was that his eyes had found mine across that crowded room. And instead of sliding past me the way everyone else's had, his gaze stopped, lingered, and then his expression changed into something I couldn't quite read. Recognition? Confusion? Surprise? He took a step toward me, and my heart began to pound for reasons I didn't understand. That's when everything changed, my dear ones. Because as Richard Sterling walked across that ballroom floor, his eyes never leaving my face, I realized something terrifying. He knew who I was. And whatever he was about to say would either save me or shatter what little remained of the life I'd been desperately trying to hold together. What did he remember? And why had he been searching for me? Time has a strange way of folding in on itself, doesn't it? One moment you're invisible, forgotten, tucked away like an old photograph in a drawer. And the next, someone walks across a crowded room and says your name, your real name, not the one you became when you disappeared into someone else's shadow. That's what happened when Richard Sterling crossed that ballroom floor. He didn't see David Preston's quiet wife. He saw me, and everything I thought I knew about my life was about to crack wide open. Richard Sterling moved through the crowd with the kind of confidence that comes from building empires, not just managing them. People instinctively stepped aside, creating a path as natural as water flowing downhill. But his eyes, sharp, intelligent, impossibly focused, never left mine. My hands trembled in my lap. I wanted to look away, to shrink further into my corner, but something kept me frozen. Maybe it was the way he looked at me. Not through me, like David had been doing all evening. Not past me, like I was furniture. But at me, like I was someone worth crossing a room for. He stopped directly in front of my small table, and I noticed the conversations around us began to quiet. People were watching, curious about why the CEO himself had abandoned the center of the party to approach a woman sitting alone by the windows. "Excuse me," he said, his voice warm but carrying an edge of uncertainty. "I hope you'll forgive my directness, but are you Margaret Chin?" My maiden name. I hadn't heard it spoken aloud in years. It hit me like a wave, bringing with it memories of a different woman, one who'd walked through MIT's halls with her head high, who'd stayed up until dawn solving equations that made her professors shake their heads in amazement, who'd believed the world was full of possibilities. My voice came out barely above a whisper. I'm Margaret Preston now. His face broke into a smile that transformed his entire demeanor. My God. I knew it. Margaret Chin. I've been trying to find you for 3 years. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Find me? I don't understand. I'm sorry, but have we met? He pulled out the chair across from me, not asking permission, but not presumptuous either. Just certain that whatever he had to say required sitting down. Not directly, no. But I know your work. In fact, my entire company was built on the foundation of your work. I blinked at him, confused. Around us, I could feel more heads turning, more conversations pausing. Somewhere across the ballroom, I caught a glimpse of David's face turning toward us, his expression shifting from curiosity to something that looked almost like alarm. I'm sorry, I said softly, but I think you have me confused with someone else. I haven't worked in technology in over 15 years. I'm just the architect of the Chin Protocol, Richard said, leaning forward with an intensity that made me catch my breath. The adaptive learning algorithm that revolutionized how computers process natural language. You published the foundational paper in 2009, right before you seemed to vanish from the academic world entirely. My heart was pounding now. The Chin Protocol. I'd nearly forgotten I'd named it after myself, a small act of pride from a woman who'd had so little of it. I'd developed it as part of my master's thesis, never imagining it would amount to anything beyond an academic exercise. That was a long time ago, I whispered. It was just theoretical research. Nothing practical came of it. Richard's expression became very serious. Margaret, that theoretical research became the cornerstone of artificial intelligence development for the entire industry. When I founded Sterling Technologies 12 years ago, we licensed your algorithm through MIT. It's the backbone of every product we've created. Our natural language processing systems, our AI interfaces, our predictive analytics, all of it traces back to what you invented. The words weren't making sense. They couldn't be real. I'd published that paper, yes, but then David had gotten a job offer in another state, and we'd moved, and I'd been pregnant with our daughter, and somehow my research had fallen away like autumn leaves, scattered and forgotten. But MIT never told me. I couldn't finish the sentence. That's why I've been trying to find you, Richard said gently. When I finally had my lawyers dig into the original licensing agreements, I discovered that MIT had paid you a pittance for your work, a one-time payment of $5,000 for unlimited commercial rights. You signed away something worth millions for the price of a used car. I felt dizzy. $5,000. Yes, I remembered. David and I had needed money for the security deposit on our new apartment. It had seemed like such a gift at the time. Money for an idea I'd created just because I'd found the problem fascinating. I wanted to make it right, Richard continued. I wanted to find you, to offer you proper compensation, to perhaps bring you on board as a consultant or even a senior researcher. Your mind created something extraordinary, Margaret. You should have been celebrated. Instead, you disappeared. Why? The question hung in the air between us like smoke. Why had I disappeared? The answer felt too complicated, too painful, too tangled up in love and sacrifice and the thousand small choices that had seemed right at the time but had somehow added up to erasing myself. I got married, I said simply, as if those 3 words explained everything. And perhaps, in a way, they did. Richard studied my face with an expression that was equal parts sadness and understanding. He doesn't know, does he? Your husband. He doesn't know what you created. I told him years ago, I said quietly, but it didn't seem important. He was building his career, and I was supporting that, and we had our daughter, and life just moved forward. Margaret. Richard's voice was firm now. What you created didn't just move forward. It changed the world. Do you understand that? Every time someone talks to a smart device, every time AI understands context instead of just keywords, every time a computer grasps nuance in human language, that's you. That's your legacy. Tears burned behind my eyes. Across the ballroom, I could see David now, fully turned toward us, his face pale even from a distance. He'd started moving in our direction, weaving through the crowd with quick, jerky movements. "Mr. Sterling," I began, but he raised a hand gently. "Richard, please." "Richard," I corrected softly. "This is very kind of you, but I think there's been some misunderstanding. I'm not that person anymore. I'm just—" "Margaret? Margaret." David's voice cut through the moment like a knife. He arrived at our table breathless, his smile too wide, too desperate. "Mr. Sterling. What an honor, sir. I see you've met my wife. Margaret, sweetheart, you didn't tell me you knew Mr. Sterling." I watched something shift in Richard's expression as he looked at my husband. A cooling, a calculation. He stood slowly, extending his hand for a handshake that seemed more formal than friendly. "Mr. Preston, I presume? I was just having a fascinating conversation with your wife about her groundbreaking work in artificial intelligence." David's smile flickered. I'm sorry, her work? The Chin Protocol? Surely you're familiar with your wife's revolutionary contribution to the field of natural language processing." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my husband's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and then something darker, something that looked like fear mixed with anger. He'd known. Somewhere deep down, he'd always known what I'd sacrificed, what I'd been. But admitting it now, in front of his CO, in front of all these people who'd been watching, that's when I saw it, my dear ones, the exact moment my husband realized that his carefully constructed image was beginning to crumble. And the look in his eyes told me that he would do anything, say anything, to keep his world from falling apart, even if it meant burying me deeper than I'd ever been buried before. But the truth, once spoken, cannot be unspoken. And Richard Sterling wasn't finished talking. There's a moment in every story, my darlings, when the lies we've been living with suddenly become too heavy to carry. When the truth stands up and demands to be seen, no matter how many people have tried to bury it. That moment came for me in a ballroom filled with strangers, with my husband's face going pale and Richard Sterling's eyes growing sharper. I'd spent 15 years making myself smaller, quieter, less. But the past has a funny way of refusing to stay forgotten. And that night, surrounded by champagne and crystal and people who'd never known my name, I was about to remember exactly who I used to be. David's laugh came out forced, artificial, like something breaking. "The Chin Protocol? Mr. Sterling, I think there might be some confusion here. Margaret did some academic work years ago, sure, but nothing that would be relevant to—" "Nothing relevant?" Richard's voice remained pleasant, but I heard steel beneath the silk. "Mr. Preston, your wife's algorithm is quite literally the foundation of this company's success. In fact, it's the foundation of most AI development in the industry for the past decade." The color drained further from David's face. Around us, I could feel more people turning to listen, conversations dying away like candles being snuffed out one by one. The party was becoming an audience, and we were suddenly the main performance. "Margaret never mentioned—" David started, then stopped, realizing how that sentence would sound. That his own wife's greatest achievement had been so insignificant to him that she'd never bothered mentioning it. Or worse, that she had mentioned it, and he hadn't bothered to listen. I saw the truth flicker across his face. He had known. He'd known when we were young, when I'd come home excited about my research being published, when I tried to explain what I'd discovered. He'd smiled and nodded and then changed the subject to his own graduate studies, his own career prospects, his own dreams. My accomplishments had been background noise to the symphony of his ambition. Actually, I heard myself say, my voice stronger than I expected, "I did tell you, David." When the paper was published. When MIT contacted me about licensing. You said it was nice, but that we needed to focus on practical matters. On your job offer. On the move. The words hung in the air like accusations, which I suppose they were. Richard Sterling's expression shifted into something almost protective. Mrs. Preston, I hope you'll forgive my persistence, but I've been authorized by our board to offer you a formal position with Sterling Technologies. We'd like you to join us as our Chief Innovation Consultant, with full recognition for your past contributions and proper compensation for the use of your intellectual property. The ballroom had gone completely silent now. Even the string quartet had finished their piece and hadn't started another. Chief Innovation Consultant? The words came from somewhere behind me, a woman's voice, sharp with disbelief. But she's just a housewife, isn't she? I turned to see a tall, elegant woman in a red dress, someone from David's department I'd been introduced to once or twice at company picnics. Her name was Amanda, I thought. Or Angela. One of those polished professional women who'd always made me feel frumpy and outdated. Just a housewife, Richard repeated, his voice dangerously soft. Ms. Morrison, is it? Tell me, what algorithm powers the voice recognition system you use every day on your company laptop? Amanda, yes, it was Amanda Morrison, blinked. The Chin protocol, I believe. It's mentioned in the technical documentation. Exactly. Richard turned back to me, his voice warm again. Margaret, I think it's time people understood what you created. May I? I nodded, not trusting my voice. My hands were shaking in my lap, but something was building inside me. Not anger exactly, but something fiercer. Something that had been sleeping for 15 years and was finally waking up. Richard raised his voice slightly, addressing the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting the festivities, but I'd like to take a moment to introduce someone very special. This is Dr. Margaret Chin Preston, the creator of the Chin Protocol, the adaptive learning algorithm that allows computers to understand human language with unprecedented accuracy. Without her work, Sterling Technologies wouldn't exist. Neither would most of the AI you interact with daily. The room erupted in murmurs. Heads turned. Eyes found me in my corner, no longer invisible, suddenly spotlit by truth. Margaret published her groundbreaking research 15 years ago, Richard continued, but due to an unfortunate licensing agreement, she never received proper recognition or compensation. I've spent 3 years trying to locate her, and tonight, purely by chance, I've finally succeeded. David was backing away slightly, his face a mask I'd never seen before, part panic, part rage, part humiliation. This is hardly the time or place, he said, his voice tight. Margaret, we should go. This is inappropriate. Inappropriate. The word left my mouth before I could stop it. What's inappropriate, David? That someone finally remembers what I accomplished? That someone thinks my work mattered? You're making a scene, he hissed, stepping closer, his hand reaching for my arm. But Richard moved faster, positioning himself between us with the casual grace of someone used to commanding rooms. Mr. Preston, I think your wife deserves to hear what we're offering. Unless you have some objection to her resuming her career. The challenge was unmistakable. Around us, David's colleagues, his peers, the people he'd been trying to impress all evening, watched with undisguised fascination. Some faces showed sympathy. Others showed something darker. The calculating expressions of people reassessing the man they thought they knew. Of course I don't object, David said too loudly. I've always supported Margaret's interests. But this is ancient history. She hasn't worked in the field in years. She wouldn't even know where to begin with modern systems. Wouldn't I? The words came out sharper than I intended. 15 years of swallowing my thoughts, my opinions, my knowledge, all of it suddenly burning in my throat. David, I've been following the field. Reading journals. Watching the evolution of my own work. Just because I stopped working doesn't mean I stopped thinking. His eyes widened, and I saw something that looked almost like betrayal in them. as if my continued intelligence was somehow an act of disloyalty. Richard smiled, a genuine, warm expression that made him look younger. Margaret, the field has evolved, but it's evolved from your foundation. You created the map, we've just been exploring the territory you charted. And frankly, we could use your perspective. The original architect's vision. If you're interested, of course. She's not, David said flatly. She has responsibilities. Our daughter, our home. Our daughter is in college, I interrupted, my voice steady now. 2,000 miles away. And our home runs itself just fine. The look David gave me then was one I'll never forget. It was the look of a man watching his carefully constructed world crumble, and realizing that the foundation he'd been standing on was actually a person he'd been standing on. And that person was finally standing up. My dear ones, if this story is touching your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to Grandma Alice's channel. Help me reach 1,000 subscribers before next week so I can continue sharing these stories of truth, justice, and the quiet strength we all carry within us. Your support means everything to this old woman's heart. Now, let's continue. Margaret, we need to talk about this privately, David said, his voice dropping to that tone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable but was actually issuing an ultimatum. No, I said simply. We don't. The single word seemed to echo in the silence. Richard Sterling was watching me with an expression of quiet approval, and around us, I could feel the energy of the room shifting. The women, especially, I caught their eyes, saw recognition there. How many of them had made themselves smaller for their husbands' careers? How many had hidden their own lights so someone else could shine brighter? Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice gaining strength with each word, you said you wanted to make things right. What exactly does that mean? Richard's smile widened. It means recognition, first. Your name added to all our technical documentation and patents that utilize your work. Second, a formal apology from MIT for undervaluing your intellectual property. And third, a compensation package that reflects the true value of what you created, both retroactively and going forward, should you choose to join our team. How much? The question came from David, his voice strangled. Richard named a figure that made several people gasp. It was more money than David would make in a decade. More money than I'd ever imagined having. Enough to rewrite the story of who needed whom in our marriage. I looked at my husband then, really looked at him. Saw the man I'd loved, yes, but also the man who'd been content to let me disappear. Who'd hidden me at parties. Who'd reduced my dreams to ancient history. And I realized something that both broke my heart and set it free. I had spent 15 years making him comfortable. Now it was time to make myself whole. But what David said next would change everything. Because sometimes, when a man realizes he's losing control, he doesn't let go gracefully. He fights. And the weapons he chooses can destroy more than just a marriage.